Thank you for joining us for the HCA Middle East Symposium. I'm Shalek. I'm a faculty member at MIT, Reagan, and Broad. Been involved in doing single-cell work for a very long time, and I help to co-lead the equity working group, and I'm delighted to be here today with a number of panelists. I'm going to go ahead and let each of them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the science they do before you go and jump in. I'm just going to follow around the boxes that I have in my Zoom window. John, you're first.
Sure, thanks, Alex. John Randell, I'm Chief Alliance Officer for HCA, based in the U.S. Executive Office.
Thanks, John. Laleh?
Thanks.
I'm leading a computational group at MDC Berlin, and we develop computational methods for analyzing single-cell high-throughput data.
Welcome. Naomi?
Hi, I'm Naomi Habib. I'm from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and my lab is studying Alzheimer's disease and aging-related disorders, both looking at the brain and brain-immune crosstalk, doing a lot of omics and single-cell omics, a lot of nuclei, and computational development of algorithms as well.
Welcome. Youssef?
Hi, everyone. I'm Youssef, faculty in biology at New York University in Abu Dhabi. So our work focuses on population and quantitative genomics of complex traits with a focus on host response to infection, gene-environment interactions, using multi-omics from genomes, transcriptomes, metabolomes, lipidomes.
And last but not least, Mohammed?
Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm an associate professor here at Mohammed bin Rashid University of Medicine and Health Sciences. So my lab does single-cell work as well, along with other omics, but we are focused on neurodevelopmental disorders and how to integrate clinical genetics with single-cell. That's a niche place where we work on.
Very cool. Well, thank you all for joining us. I wanted to start off by asking a simple but maybe provocative question. Why do you contribute or participate in the HCA? What is it that inspires you to be part of this community and makes you enjoy being part of this community? Laleh, I'm gonna have you kick this off just because I know that we have not met before with this. So I would love to hear your opinion. Being somebody that has a fresh perspective.
Yeah, so I got to know about HCA when I was doing a postdoc in Cambridge with John Marioni and then, of course, Sarah Teichmann. So this is where I got to know a little about the project, and of course, it's a very interesting and important idea, like in human health today. And then I heard about this Middle East Symposium. Of course, like I come from Iran, and so this is also very important for me. Like we also heard in a few talks, it's a very difficult time now in Israel, but in general, this region, right? So it's very instable, and we doing science coming together. This is very important for me, like despite all the difficulties, every country in the region in another way. But yeah, so I found the idea interesting. I know the basis, our human cell atlas, and then how, of course, we could also with the computational methods and other things contribute.
Very cool. Mohammed?
Yeah, so for us in clinical genetics, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and single cell brings so much insight into human, not just human, transcriptome, and also it brings insight into human genomes in many ways. So I'm fascinated by mRNA, and single cell is a way to, look at it in the most microscopic way possible. So having HCA, of course, is it drives you. Yeah, we want to be part of the larger community. We want to know, want to contribute. So that kind of drives me into it.
Very cool. Youssef?
Yeah, so my perspective is slightly different. So my group is relatively new to the field of single-cell genomics, although we've been interested in it for a long time. So yeah, actually for me, it's I come from the training perspective. I care a lot about training initiatives and working on underrepresented populations. So the discussions start when we met in Rabat in Morocco during the African Society of Human Genetics meeting. And really, I was intrigued by the synergies that HCA could have with some of our own work that we're trying to do here in the Middle East, including organization of events, and particularly actually bringing events to the region as opposed to actually going and attending meetings in Europe or in North America. So that's a huge value for us, and I know a lot of people are excited about the initiatives and how it can contribute to training locally.
100%, and I know that's something that you and I both share a passion for. And I'm glad that you decided to join, even though I did not get up on that little platform and dance with you at that meeting. You're probably here because I did not get up on that platform and dance with you. Anyway, Naomi?
Yeah, I think from the scientific point of view, there's such value in what we're trying to do here in building these atlases and mapping cellular diversity. We already see how it's transforming science. But specifically the HCA, and why I like to be part of the HCA, is more what it brings alongside the science. So there are so many principles that I think are important for a better scientific research, like data sharing, technology sharing. So Youssef, what you mentioned about the training, and also there's so much emphasis on making this science more global. So it depends both on in terms of science, if we're mapping cells, so not just Caucasians, but people who really represent all the world. And also in terms of trying to get the technologies to more remote locations. And I think this is where it also kind of captures us here in the Middle East, where I think without such initiatives, it's harder to, we're not close to where the source of the technologies are always. The machines could be much more expensive, so we need more accessible technologies. And I really resonate with what Laleh said, that even the initiative of bringing, we have great science in the Middle East, but we're not that collaborative, where we don't have these strong connections, at least from my point of view, and that would definitely be a great improvement.
Thanks, everybody. And that's a great place to sort of transition to the next question. Where do you see the HCA at currently in your region, and where would you like it to be in the next few years, let's say in 5 years and 10 years? And so maybe I'll start with you, Youssef, just because you were talking about some of the training initiatives and creating capacity. And so I'm sure you've thought a little bit about what you'd like to see, locally at NYU, but also more broadly through talking to some of your colleagues.
Sure, and just not to take a lot of time, I will be very specific with regard to this. So, and again, this is based on perspective from colleagues, students that we tried to gather in the last few months here. So one of the main issues here in the region is really technologies that are really very fast evolving, like single-cell genomics, are very, very challenging for a lot of institutions here. So it's a common thing that institutions invest a lot in equipment, and then by the time people collect samples and produce the data, the field is already moving very fast. So that really posed a lot of challenges. There are models to fix this experimentally by working with core technology platforms or these centers of excellence that can actually provide the expertise in a more centralized way. So that's something that would take a lot of time to actually, keep the same pace in terms of the data that is being produced. But on the other hand, when it comes to training, this is something that HCA and other initiatives can really help with, which is like, again, training, keeping track with the most recent developments in the field, but importantly, making sure that those methods that are being developed also fit with the types of data that are produced locally. These experiments tend to be extremely expensive as well. So the cycle of funding, by the time people apply for funding and get their data, the tools change, the different versions. Then you have issues with batch effects. And so that's a very present need for the community here. And again, there are a lot of disparities between the countries in terms of of just the pace of how fast they can produce these types of data. So I think HCA and this is happening with other initiatives as well. If they can contribute to establishing some sort of a regular training initiatives, not once a year, but because I don't think that's sufficient, but ways through which people can enroll in different modules, also from basic to advanced. That's one of the other challenges here. We faced this with our own efforts to set up like statistical genetic workshops here. And we came up with solutions to this by providing modules and a combination of online and in-person events for the young trainees and students. So that's again something that hopefully in a few years, HCA can be one of the contributors specifically for a single-cell genomics field.
Thanks. I definitely have some thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear, John, how you think about that, particularly as somebody who's helping to organize and coordinate activities broadly with HCA.
Absolutely. You heard from both myself and my colleague Lucia Robeson yesterday about where we are currently in HCA. I think in terms of getting beyond the first draft of the atlas and getting to a fully comprehensive atlas, there are many challenges, but three big ones that we're really thinking a lot about right now are first, the incorporation of new types of data, going beyond single-cell transcriptomics and looking at three-dimensional mapping, the incorporation of ATAC-seq and other data types. That's one major challenge. Another is actually providing access to these data in an equitable manner, and that's going to require both maintenance of the platforms that enable us to provide open access to DNA, but also to data, but also much more sophisticated data platforms that account for those new forms of data and the three-dimensionality of the human cell atlas. And the third major challenge is really the diversity challenge, that it's both a challenge in data collection and data analysis, which needs to take place at a much greater scale everywhere in the world. But as Youssef was very eloquently talking about, providing that kind of the training capacity, the information exchange, the ability of scientists to interact fully and so forth. And so, and Alex, you're the co-chair of HCA's equity working group, and so you're really deeply involved in all of those activities. So I'm sure you also have a perspective on that question.
I have way too many perspectives on that. I would just say that, I appreciate the points that you raised about representation in the HCA and that came up earlier, but, as you know from talking to me, and I think everybody's knows, I think a lot about equity with respect to participation and data benefit. And so a lot of what we focused on the equity working group is some of the things that Youssef brought up before: training, capacity creation, meeting people, trying to create connectivity in individuals that can be hubs of excellence, so that can pass along knowledge, and creating that densely connected network where people can send me an email and ask me to read their grants, or ask, what parameters we would use in a specific program for doing analysis. But, in each of these things, I've sort of found that the best thing to do is to not assume that we know what anybody needs, but instead to listen and to really make sure that we've heard properly where people are at, and step in and figure out how we can create training modules, think about access to different technologies based upon local budgets, local priorities, local things that individuals need. And I'm very glad we're having this remote meeting. I would rather be over visiting some of my colleagues on the screen right now, and hopefully I will be at some point soon. But I would also say that I'm glad that we've started, because having these first meetings are an invitation for people to start connecting with us. And anybody can email me. It's my last name at mit.edu to start to talk about how we could set up something and get something going. I would also love to hear from the others on what they see. And, I'll go to Mohammed next, just because I heard you mention the importance of thinking about this in a clinical context. And I think that, I will say personally, I have a bias, which is that I love the idea of a reference map, but I only like the idea of a reference map that's useful and if it can impact the treatment and care of individuals, because to me, that's what motivates me. It's about communities. It's about helping people. It's about, leading to better and longer lives. So where would you like to see the HCA be in the next few years, and in 5 or 10, at your university?
Yep. Right, I agree with you regarding the impact, because whenever we build a database, we have to be very objective why we are building it and how it will create impact. And for clinical genetics, we have so much to give it to the community, especially the community with that are impacted by different genetic diseases and lack the therapeutics or drug designs. To me, single cell is a big answer to the precision medicine puzzle, because if you think about precision medicine or personalized medicine in a way, single cell gives you the highest resolution to be precise. So if that is the case, how do you incorporate that into clinical practice? So one way would be to see if the gene is mutated, what kind of cell type it is impacting, because not for that mutation, not all cell type will be behaving the same way. There will be one will behave the more rogue than the other. So can we target those cell types? How do you target that cell type? So those are the complex questions. Those are the ultimate answer for precision medicine in terms of genetic diseases. That's where I want to see HCA kind of contributes more into the method and show us examples, basically, how to develop that kind of drug design, or how to go there to resolve some of the genetic mutations or genes that are uncharacterized. For example, in neurodevelopmental disorders, we are impacted by 30-40% of the cases who have uncharacterized mutation. We really don't know how to define those mutations, and this is where this kind of cell atlas that can be very impactful to resolve those mutations. It takes a traditional method, it takes a long time to characterize mutations.
Yeah, 100%. I was given a talk about this at Harvard Immunology yesterday, about the importance of understanding the cells as the machines that translate these genetic mutations into actions that can lead to unintended or unwanted outcomes. Naomi?
Yeah, so I referred to it a little bit. I think there are like 3 different kind of layers here. The first is really trying to represent better our region in terms of samples, which is it's kind of disconnected a little bit from the technology. It's more like integrating scientists and even clinicians who are more connected to and able to collect samples and adding them to our atlasing efforts throughout the world. And that's I don't know how much that is done, but potentially, I mean, this is more about being exposed. I see a lot of clinicians are not exposed to like the HCA, definitely not in Israel, and I assume in other countries in the Middle East. In terms of the science, I think we see so much value in these technologies, but how do we get more people to be engaged and involved? And I think coming from Boston with a single nucleotide technology, it was very easy for me to then push forward and integrate that into the own lab I built here in Israel. But I see around me that people have been struggling with that. And I think it starts with a technology being not accessible. And I see a huge change now that in many universities in Israel, there's like within like genomic centers, there's like a service providing single cell services. And that's been like a game changer. So I think the more we have that, that would really transform. So maybe, I mean, kind of tapping into what Youssef said about training, it's also about opening these kind of centers of knowledge. So it starts with a data generation. And of course, if we're able to integrate technologies or not so expensive, it would be much more accessible. But it doesn't have to be every student who knows how to do it, but rather like a service area that can provide it. And then the second challenge is, of course, the analysis. So we need also like this, similarly, I see people can run and then they don't know what to do with the results. And the analysis stays at a very basic level and you can't extract these additional information from that. So I think maybe like a combination of training and some kind of a knowledge hub that is much more accessible elsewhere and kind of lacking here, I would say.
I hear you. I have a slight difference of opinion. I love the idea that you can run things as a core, but as I'm sure you know, I'm a big believer that everybody should understand how everything works so that they can, put their stuff together. If you don't understand how the experiments work, it's hard to analyze the data. If you don't know how to analyze data, it's hard to structure experiments. And I think like those are major themes that we try and bring up when we're doing training. Laleh, on your end?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, from the computational view, I am coming. I also see a lot of need for this, like not only developing new methods, like to understand the data better, but also that there is a lot of need for like mathematics and bioinformatics in all labs, right? So now we are like there are some like this AI and machine learning is developing very fast. There are a couple of tools out there that are more or less standard in the field people use. But again, there is a lot of details even about existing methods, right? Like now people talk about explainability, like especially working with human data, you want to be sure what you're looking at, what you do with it. So I also see like a lot of like, I mean, it's caveat, but it is a good thing. That means like it can be fielded and needs some more attention to really like, I mean, technology is developing very fast, it's all nice, but I really see that need for more strong computational and mathematical contributions.
Gotcha. Youssef, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, if I might just add a point, I really like the idea that Naomi highlighted, which is knowledge hubs. And specifically, I want to highlight some of our own work that we are doing under CZI as part of the African Ancestry Networks. It's really working well for us because we are using it as a platform to actually bring local scientists from countries that don't have the technology or the computational resources to be actually part of it. So it's really an inclusive initiatives. We just started, so we are still in the process of collecting samples, but we already exposed students, trainees in Morocco to the methods of how to collect samples in the field, and it's a gradual process, and they're going to accompany us in the entire process all the way to publication. So that's something that I think HCA could probably develop. I don't know if in under what theme or platform, but those are ways of being actually inclusive without the need to establish those local like heavy duty platforms that a lot of countries don't have the resources for.
Well, so that's a great transition to another question that I wanted to ask, which I'll push right back to you, and I'll say, well, what are the regional strengths that HCA can help support and contribute to not only help regional scientists, but also to make broader contributions to HCA. You were talking about some of the things that you started to do to bring some of the science through a CCI hub into some of the work that you've been doing in Morocco, and I'd love to understand better, what you think are regional strengths and how the HCA could help support those, and how that would contribute, to the HCA in the long run, in your view.
So one of the strengths that is really the excitement of the trainees, they are also very intimidated by the field of synthesis and genomics. I've been involved in training initiatives on just regular, like let's say, we started with microarrays, then we transitioned to bulk RNA-seq. And once people started being comfortable with these technologies, then the field is making a transition to synthesis and genomics. I know many who submitted their papers in the last few years using bulk RNA-seq, and their papers are rejected because everyone now is expected to use synthesis and genomics. I don't necessarily agree with that. In a lot of for a lot of questions, you simply only need bulk RNA-seq. But there is this push from the field as a whole to embrace these technologies in ways that are not sustainable locally. But again, I know there is a lot of excitement from students and trainees. We have to remember that our graduate students, our postdocs are the ones who will start their own labs very soon, and that's the expectation for them. I know I won't speak for Mohammed But I know a lot of people in the region spend a lot of time, really, really significant efforts to actually, establish, like build capacity for what we do. It took, I don't know how many years it took Mohammed to produce the first single-cell data set or to order the first Chromium or other pieces of equipment, but that's a major challenge that I think it's not a strength, but it's a challenge that we hope initiatives like HCA and others can help with.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with your comments on both, and I think it's a place where we can definitely help to accelerate things. Naomi, I think you have your hand raised.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I just want to kind of reinforce that Youssef said that I think it starts with being a bit remote from the technology, so you kind of we're not updated necessarily on time, and then everything's a little slower in this integration. And the question is, I mean, as that we are part of this community and we are part of it, can we actually, what kind of initiatives can we have that can help spread the technology earlier? Of course, part of it is funding, and that's something that's, I don't know how much we can solve, but part of it is also just knowledge and exposure, right, on time. Wondering if we can kind of extend what we're doing to a more kind of local seminars. I think Zoom seminars don't work generally, right? But trying to kind of think out loud if there is some way to narrow this gap a little bit, so we won't be like so many years behind.
I hear you. I don't think Zoom totally doesn't work, but there's nothing like in-person connections and those side conversations you have over coffee or tea or food. I guess what I would say, building up what you and Youssef both brought up, is this point of, there's a need to help accelerate activities. And so, Mohammed, I'd be very interested in what are the things that HCA can do that we can do. And HCA is not this abstract thing. It's a grassroots movement. It's a bunch of scientists. I've been doing this for a long time, but I am no more HCA than any of you. So I would say, what can we as a community of scientists do to help accelerate uptake, adoption, engagement? What are the things that would help you to get more engaged in the HCA locally? I'd be interested in some of the things that you brought up, because I don't think that we can't necessarily push things like funding. I think these are things we need to know. So what would be the most beneficial things from your vantage point?
I mean, if I look at UAE, especially like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, I see all the labs, they do a lot of cell culture related work, but it has to do with like those old technology, this transition will require some level of intervention from us, I guess, like how your cell can be analyzed in a very high precision microscopic way, so you can look at the molecule at a single cell resolution. So that kind of education, I think, will require, it goes back to what Youssef just mentioned, maybe some training and workshops, again, multiple times, but it has to be on site, on site in hand. We need to show them how to do it. And I also will say the weakness is what we see here, where maybe HCA can also contribute. The weakness is all these labs that we see here in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or maybe in Saudi as well. These are all wet labs, and they don't have the capacity for computation. And there is a huge void there. And this is where maybe we can also, or HCA can contribute a lot, having only bioinformatics kind of workshop instead of lab related workshop, because that's kind of like a fear kind of thing works, because I am generating this amount of data, I really don't know how to analyze it, so let's not spend that much money. So it ties up with your grant as well. I don't want to spend this much of money if I don't know how to analyze it. So that's also what Naomi said, is a service center. Having some more service center kind of also helps filling those voids. So yeah, I think HCA needs to be here in the Middle East more often. So all of to touch base on all of those, then we can move on.
Well, you're part of HCA and you're there, so we're already there, but more of us could be there and help out more. Laleh, I'd love to hear your thoughts building off sort of the comments about computational needs and how we can help to enable and empower more individuals towards using this data, not just collecting it.
Yes, yeah, I think there are like a very like I mean, coming from Iran, I know like in Iran we get very good math education, right? So I'm saying it's as an example, right? So, but just making these connections more efficient, that could be very helpful. Like I mean, the Iranian students, they are usually very good in mathematics, but then yeah, they don't know these new technologies. So there is a gap, right? So before you can use this knowledge that can be really helpful, and this is what the field needs. Yeah, I also think like meetings like this. So now we had different talks from like a very good scientists, from all over the world. I don't know, US, Europe, Israel, Saudi Arabia. I mean, everywhere, but also like people in the country. There were speakers from inside Iran, and just making these connections more efficient somehow. I don't know how, like making people talk to each other, see the relation between the problems they are working on, and inspire them to collaborate and talk to each other maybe. And catch up with
100%.
what they are lagging behind. Like if it is a new technology that they don't know, or if it is some more bioinformatics that they need to grasp, like make the connections stronger.
I hear you. I wouldn't say only catch up, as you point out, there are regions that are extremely strong things like Iran in with respect to mathematics, and bringing to bear that knowledge on the analytical methods we use could be an incredible boon for everybody in HCA, not just scientists within the region. Naomi, I'd love to hear from you as well, as you said, as somebody that brought over a technology. You know, you say hubs of excellence. I'm very sensitive to the idea of not being a hub of excellence myself. And so what do you think HCA could do to help, you know, enable and engage more individuals, as opposed to just saying, why don't you go run this with either Youssef or Naomi?
Yeah, it's true that we are little hubs of knowledge already, and people do come and frequently come and talk with a lab, and we're helping many, but we can't really serve the entire community. I don't know if I have any new ideas. I think what Mohammed said about these hands-on training will probably be the best. I think, I mean, you don't like this idea, but actually like having like the technology more as like in the genomics center did open up for many labs who couldn't do it before are now doing it. And then, as I said before, then they're stuck in the next step of the analysis. So these hands-on training are not only on how to collect samples and process them, but actually the bioinformatic training is, I feel, really, it's, at least in Israel, it's a major bottleneck.
It's not that I don't like it. It's that I don't like it when we just push things over to a core, things get run and they come back, and it's as though it's this magic box. I think that people need to understand what's happening underneath the hood, because
definitely,
if Laleh and her colleagues are going to bring to bear new mathematical methods, they need to understand what assumptions can be made about the technology and what can't. And so, I'm not saying everybody needs to know how to pipe at everything or to run code in every language, but I do think that sort of this multidisciplinary knowledge and familiarity and a shared language is critical to building some of the connections that we were speaking about before. Youssef?
And we see something similar in the analysis, that people are plugging their data to Sarat and getting some clustering data. It could be clustering that are completely technically driven, like separating low number of genes from high number of genes, but without this kind of accompanying knowledge, it's really challenging to go beyond that. Sorry.
Youssef?
Yeah, just because we are talking about empowering people. So I'm just curious actually to hear from John if there are any opportunities maybe for personal and professional development specifically that HCA can provide for our trainees in the region beyond these training events or seminars, symposiums.
I think there are definitely opportunities, things that we have discussed but haven't really implemented yet. We've talked about, training in sort of associated, or we've talked about ethics in this meeting, for example, and there are certainly opportunities to provide training in ethics, governance, and so forth, other elements of the science as well. I'd also just like to point out that one thing I've really been inspired by in HCA is how collaborations can kind of lead to more collaborations and actually grow over time. That's been a model that's been very, very effective in HCA, both within countries, but particularly across regions, where identifying a few centers, like we're talking about, knowledge centers, that can then come together and collaborate, whether it's organizing training opportunities or actually sort of nucleating new grant proposals, new projects. That's a great way to then pull in some of the less experienced centers or less experienced researchers to sort of grow the collaboration over time. It's been very, very effective in Asia and Latin America, and I'm sure it will be in the Middle East as well.
So, Youssef, I would also say that, since this is a grassroots movement and doesn't technically have funders behind it, it's a lot of conversations with individuals to understand what is needed that push us to think about the next ask that we make. And so I have before, and I'm delighted to go again to various funders hand to hand to ask for things. And so we've talked about things like bidirectional student exchange, where somebody from a lab anywhere in the world could come and spend 2 weeks, or where somebody from my lab could go spend 2 weeks anywhere and learn about needs and create those interpersonal connections and think about how do technologies get adapted, or how could you use something in a way that's effective. And so I'd encourage you all to reach out to any of us, me in particular, if you want to say, this is what I think would really move the needle, because I'd rather go to a funder and say, I've been told this would move the needle by multiple people from multiple regions, and this is what they really want to see, as opposed to just saying, please give us money so that we can do more outreach activities. And so I think the more granular and concrete we can be, the better we can do at actually advocating and pushing for those things to happen. I'm not going to tell you that everybody gives money overnight, but we've had some success in the past, and hopefully we will in the future. Mohammed?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. So maybe HCA is not there yet, but at some point, maybe when you have, version 1, you want to do an ethnic validation, maybe. So how that fit into this regional, committee that we have, and maybe can we have a working group within the region, say, that validates what ethnically maybe we want to replicate or identify cell types or the morphology of the cells or the function of the cells that's been identified in the bigger atlases. So that's something that can be established. So that will give us some mechanism to involve more training to work. We have a objective to produce data and also to work as a group within this region.
Yeah, totally agree. I'd love to know what other topics and themes you all would like to see in the future, particularly as we think about programming or activities that would specifically relate to the Middle East. I was thinking a lot, Naomi, about some of the things that you brought up, because we've recently run computational workshops in Latin America and in West Africa, and have thought about, how to create training modules in notebooks that are well annotated, so that as people go through, there are questions and they're asked to toggle parameters and think about what it does to the underlying data and what that's telling you about it. And so I would be interested in other elements that you think would be very useful or that you'd like to see. Mohammed, you just brought up some great ones around sort of coordinating and organizing. Are there others that you all have in mind? I know we only have a couple minutes, but I'll let anybody jump in. Or I will call on you, like we are in my class at MIT. Laleh, I'm going to turn to you, because you were trying to avoid eye contact.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'll say something. So on a different, going back away from the computational, maybe one of the first ideas I raised that might be actually also easy to implement, which is related to, I think not many people are that aware of the human cell atlas. So it has to be something kind of more active. And that's much more true, even more for the clinician part of the, so actually at the first step, even getting to have better representation for people from diverse backgrounds that come from the Middle East would definitely be really critical, especially in drug development and, you know, understanding diseases. So essentially that is something we could reach out to as part of one of these big projects. Like if we're mapping, you know, I know there is a lot of in kind of awareness for that in the HCA. The question is, do we actually have samples enough coming from the Middle East into all of these atlasing initiatives? So that's something, I mean, there's funding, and the sequencing could be in the Middle East or in anywhere in the world, depending on the tissue.
That's what I was referring to, actually, the ethnic validation, maybe. So whatever is you're reporting in other population, can you replicate or see what's in here in Middle East?
Yeah, totally understood. And, you know, as I said before, I think the representation is a really critical thing to make sure that we derive benefit, as is getting people actively participating and really thinking about how the data that we're generating can give back to the communities. I know we're a little over time, so maybe I'll just ask John to really quickly, for the people who are online, to explain how people can get involved in the science or help direct the priorities, since the things that we do really come from what people tell us they would like to see happen.
Absolutely. I would say the first thing is, if you are not a member of HCA, please sign up. We have a very large membership. We actually have memberships in members in 97 countries. So it's very much a global membership. That's a great way to be involved. You will get the newsletter for HCA. You'll get notices of meetings and so forth. Joining the biological networks is really a super way to be involved, because that gives you connections to people who are not just working in the field, but actually working on your tissue or your tissues of interest. I would also point out that we actually have one of the bio networks is actually on genetic diversity. That's a very active biological network that's helping all of the biological networks think through these questions about how to sort of set goals and metrics and analyze genetic diversity. And so there's some information being put in the chat about how to join. But that's a really wonderful way to join, participate in webinars, network with other people that have similar research interests to you. So I would really encourage everybody to join one or more. You don't have to join just one, so join any that are of interest to you. And then, of course, coming to HCA meetings, you know, as I think Alex has sort of alluded to, HCA really is all of you. And so we really look to our members to suggest activities and to help us develop ideas and implement them across HCA. So I would just encourage you also to be in touch with the executive office at any time if you do have ideas for how HCA can assist your work and research in the region.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, Laleh. Thanks, Naomi. And thanks, Youssef, for thoughts and for joining in this panel. I'll turn it back over to you, John. I think it's you and Youssef who are going to be doing the closing. Okay.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
And thank you all. Thank you again. I just would like to reiterate my thanks to everyone. This was really great couple of days, amazing talks. What really also impressed me is that there was quite a bit of unpublished data, which is always very exciting in symposiums like this. I thank the moderators, the scientific advisory team as well, and also special thanks to, again, Christine and Bridget and to everyone else.
I would just second all of that, and thank you all for coming. This has been really a milestone event for HCA, but it's of course not the first event, or sorry, not the last event that we will do in the Middle East. And so we're already thinking about what to do next. We want to hear your ideas and if possible, involve you in planning for future activities, hopefully, as we've already discussed, with an in-person component. Thank you again.